Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Youth for Youth podcast series by the Mohanji Youth Club. I'm Anusha, and I'm joined by Mohanish today, and we'll be hosting today's session. To share a little background on our work, through our MYC Crisis Management Project, we've been offering free disaster preparedness training and awareness sessions to communities globally, focusing especially on children, teens, youth groups, and underprivileged communities. Our main areas of focus includes natural disaster, man-made disaster, and mental health crisis during emergencies. We started this project about 10 months ago, and as we progressed, we noticed that while many programs focus on training, they often overlook something very critical: how people stay calm before, during, and after crisis, and support each other emotionally during and after a crisis. So we began to approach our work in three ways. First is training, second is expression, and third is emotional resilience, covering it in a more holistic way. And from this, we developed a few key initiatives. First is U-Lead, which focuses on disaster preparedness and awareness training for educational institutions or communities. Second is Stability and Survival Stories, a platform where young people can share their experiences of crisis and how they overcame it through creative art or any form of nonviolent expression. And the third is Mauna, a weekly meetup, both online or offline, that helps individuals come together, connect in silence, release the stress or fear that they may have, detox the mind, and eventually respond with greater calm and clarity. And through all this, one thing was very clear to us. While we are working within the communities, there's a much larger conversation happening globally around disaster risk reduction, youth engagement, and policy. And that's exactly where today's conversation becomes really exciting, because we are not just looking at what's happening on the ground, but also on how youth voices are being represented and shaped at a global level. So, joining us today is our guest, Katherine Sotomayor, an anthropological linguist and a consultant working at the intersection of disaster risk reduction, sustainability, and inclusive education. She currently serves as the global focal point for Sendai Stakeholders Constituency of UN Major Groups for Children and Youth, and as co-chair of the Stakeholder Engagement Mechanism for the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Previously, she was the executive secretary of the Youth Network on Disaster Risk Reduction, where she played a key role in advancing youth participation in global resilience and policy conversations. Katherine has worked closely with the UNDRR at both regional and global levels, contributing to international reports, leading webinars, and speaking at global forums. What really stands out about her work is how she brings together policy, education, and community action, creating space for youth voices and building more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable solutions across the world. Katherine, welcome, and it's such a pleasure to have you today with us.
Thank you so much, Anusha, and thank you all for the invitation. I'm really excited.
Yeah, thank you. To start off, we know that many young minds often may not think about working in disaster risk reduction due to fear factor or any other issues. However, what was the moment for you, that personally pulled you to this world? And was there like a specific crisis you witnessed, or a person, a situation, or a feeling that pulled you into this direction?
Okay, thank you for your question, Anusha. Well, of course, I didn't grow up thinking I want to work in disaster risk reduction, right? And most people don't. But as an anthropologist, what pulled me in was this realization that disasters are deeply shaped in inequalities. So when I started seeing how the same hazard affects people very differently, depending on the type of on their gender, on where they live, or their income, their access to information. Once I started to realizing that, I I wonder if it wasn't only one single crisis, what is needed? And I realized we needed a shift of perspective on how the system is structured. And in that moment where I understood that disasters are not only about emergency response, but they are also about systems, decisions, prevention. And once I see all that, it was very hard to look away. So I started working as an anthropologist for city management and city planning, urban planification, and all that. But um, disasters are not inevitable. They can be reduced, the outcome can be reduced, but this is when I realized that I wanted to work in a place that it can actually make those outcomes change and help people. So basically, that's when I started.
Right.
That's amazing. But many young people are not aware about the frameworks that exist for disaster risk reduction. One of the framework is the Sendai framework, and you have been the global focal point for Sendai stakeholders constituency of major group. So, can you give us a brief about what is this Sendai framework and how do you think we can fix this disconnect between the youth and understanding of such frameworks?
Okay, thank you, Mohanesh, for your question. So, the Sendai framework is essentially a global blueprint to reduce disaster risk. And it has four priorities. It's understanding the risk, strengthening the governance, investing in resilience, and number four is enhancing this preparedness and recovery. But the problem is that all those frameworks were never designed to be accessible. So many people don't know them because they are also pretty technical. So people need to understand them better. And the frameworks lives in policy spaces, in technical language, in government processes. So it's pretty away from people, and one way of interacting as youth is fix that disconnection and translate it, not just in forum, not just going to schools and say, hey, do you know that there's a framework that can help us to build resilience or to build back better? No, is people really matching into it and bring it into the system. So connect to real life issues that we already care about, for example, climate or housing or inequality, and understanding how that framework that it's up there can really live in our reality. But most importantly, in the case of youth, is to move from just participate in the events to co-create into the policy making. So that was very important because right now the processes in the world are seeing youth as some people who can observe the whole process, but we should be also shaping the agenda, and all stakeholders should be shaping the agenda because at the end, the citizens are the most affected. So, and we are all citizens. So, how do we shape that? Then we need to speak up. Like, okay, this is the framework, this is what it helps, and we have this, and as a member of the United Nations, my country has agreed to implement it. okay, now how it has been implemented. Now that we have the Santiago network, how does that connect into the Sendai framework? Now that we are negotiating the protection of people in the event of disasters, that it's a treaty that it's under review because it was created on 2026 on 2016, sorry. And now that it's being reviewed to move forward and to integrate and to be a legally binding document for member states, it's like we know something is happening in the world, that it's affecting all of us, and we need to take action. But at the same time, when you have all these political implementations, as you and I believe, like, how can I be there? And if I'm not there, or if I don't have the privilege to be there, what can I do? And that's when communities became very, very important. If you look away from your community, you will never get further. But if you look into your community, if you change the way your neighborhood interacts around disaster, that's when change happens.
Right. I completely agree with you that many frameworks may not be accessible to the youth, and also voices matter. And you being the inspiration for many young minds, I wanted to ask you this. You've sat in discussions at UNDRR Geneva, where decisions are made that shape the lives of millions. What does it actually feel like to be a young person in those spaces? And was there a moment where you almost didn't believe that you belonged there?
Actually, yes. The first time that I got into a space in United Nations, I was very intimidated. I was like, how can I be here along with diplomats, experts, people that it's older than me, that has been advocating for this over the past 10 years at least, and they have tons of experience too. So I believe that the first thing that you have is that you are very aware of your age. And there are moments where you question if you belong. And I have them too. But then I remember one of my professors in university told me, like, if you are there along with them, it's because you're important too. So, and even if you are not there like physically, but you can join virtually and you are getting all these tools to implement somewhere else, then you're making the change too. So I stick to that, and in that moments when I question, it's like I'm not there by accident. I'm there because the youth perspective is often missing in those rooms, and being young at those spaces, at the spaces, I'm sorry, it's like it means two things at the same time. First is that the formal power, well, that you have is less compared to those people, but at the same time, you have more urgency, you have a closer connection to the reality on the ground, and that's what it makes it important. So the challenge is not just like, okay, I need to be present, but I need to make sure that my voice actually influences the outcomes, and how do we shape this and what I contribute. And of course, it comes with a lot of responsibility because I know that being in those spaces, it's a very privileged thing to be. So not everyone can go do visa, do financing, due to they're attached to work. So I know that it is also a privilege, and I feel very responsible of what I'm saying. So when I'm trying to participate, um, I don't usually shape my my speeches alone. I share them with my networks and say, okay, I'm presenting this, or I'm going to talk about this specific topic. This is my idea, but what can you say? What am I missing? Right? It's not only about my voice, but like we share something. And that has been very important because that also builds community. So, yeah, that's what I try to do.
Yes, as you said, you speak for the all the youth voices, so you represent that. Yes.
And I agree, it's a huge responsibility for you, Catherine, because you're representing all the youth globally as the global focal point. I want to ask you, about this experience of being the GFP of the Sendai Stakeholder Constituency. What are the challenges? What do you enjoy? And what are some of your moments that you would like to share with us that are, yeah.
Okay. Well, it has happened a lot, right? When you contribute to these spaces, it's like it's happening a lot at the same time. So, and everything is important, but then you need to prioritize what is urgent. So, for me, if you see it like in a structured way, the biggest issue is that policies are still too reactive. It's like, okay, we have a problem, we need to create a solution. So we're trying to shift that mindset because it is a mindset. Like, okay, I will not work on a solution until I have a problem. So that's why we're trying to migrate from disaster risk reduction to disaster risk management, right? To think ahead, to stop provoking this. But at the same time, when you realize that this is a system, those policies are fragmented because we know climate change intensifies everything, but the governance systems are still working in silos. I mean, we have climate policy on one side, and we have disaster risk reduction on another, and then we have someone talking about development and someone talking about urban policies, but they are not connected. They are working in their own agendas institutionally. They have their own departments, all that. So that disconnection slows everything down. And another major challenge that we have is the short-term thinking. What I mean about that? Globally, the political cycles are more shorter than the climate timelines. I mean, we can create as people, we can create and we can think about our responses, but globally and in the international political space, they are thinking about frameworks. So, for example, the 2030 agenda, right? It was created in 2015 until 2030, and now they need to negotiate something. But there is no ruler in the world that will last those 50 years, right? So there has been political changes, and with every single new person that arrives to the power, then we have a lack of structure. Then we have someone who don't like it and erase it, and then we have someone who does like it and continue the work. So all this um, interfere with the development that we have. So these decisions often prioritize the immediate gains over the long-term resilience, and that's a problem. And the moment that we start realizing, as everyone, I mean, if you'd ever get into the political space and handles or holds a position in their governments, they need to think about this too. Don't think short term, even if it's not it doesn't if it doesn't have your name on it, like, oh, okay, this major, this president made it, but you made it for the people. And that's the whole point of being a public servant of the government. Like, you do it not for you, not for your ego, not for your interest. You have to do it for the people who voted for you and those who don't voted for you, because at the end they are citizens too. So all those policies change this very embedded way of thinking of it has to say that I did it. And it's not like that. It sometimes in all these processes, your name is not going to be there. Your name is not going to appear as you are the author of it, but you're contributing, and that's with you. So I'm guessing like having these conversations with youth and me as youth got me thinking like it doesn't matter if it doesn't say my name. What it matters is that we get to work on it. And and most of the bigger impacts, they are not told. They just happen. So
That's really true. We have realized it locally also because the political cycles are short. So people want to have that showcase projects more than the long-term vision that could really cure a problem. So it's more of a
mhm.
bandage thing than a solution to the problem. I would also like to tell everyone that you can also raise your hands, and if you have any questions for Catherine or need to or would like to share something. So yeah, meanwhile everyone thinks about the questions and suggestions. I would also like to understand. I was talking with Erwin today afternoon. He's from Indonesia. So he was telling us about the same things. He's in Bandung city, and this climate change, we are the most affected generation, the youth. So, uh, can you tell us in which ways the UNDRR and major group is helping this participation in policy frameworks? Like, what exactly is the role of major group in such activities?
Okay. Uh, well, it depends. As major groups, we have constituencies who get, um, well, based on their specialization, is where you are headed to. And one of the most important things is also realizing that you cannot know everything. I mean, if I specialize because of my major or whatever else, if I specialize in something, I know I can speak about it. And even that way, I don't know it all. So I need help. And also, the way I see the world is very different due my current situation. So my political, the way of my parents raised me, everything interferes on how do you see a problem and how do you see a solution. And the major groups raise their voices because we are 17, 21 major groups. Um, and between all of them, they're youth. I mean, in the woman and gender major group, there's also youth. In the indigenous communities, there's also youth. But we have one specifically for youth and for children and youth, right? And what we do is try to, when this frameworks, when these events are going to happen, then we try to advocate first for the inclusion of the stakeholders, that we need to be there, why it is important that we be there. And we also give that critical eye into the policies because sometimes, again, they just live in a desk, right? So once you're facing that reality, it's like, what are you doing? This is way too hard to accomplish. So let's make it a more re achievable action, right? And that is it, the job of the major groups, like having this critical eye from the outside saying, okay, your framework it's pretty like and in paper everything sounds perfect, but in reality you're not considering this, and the third part. So, what can we do? Or even if it works, the political situation in each country is different. So, some of them will not agree, and for some of them, it's not even achievable. I mean, they don't have the funds. This is way too up. And what can we do? And when you're having these ministerial conversations, then we have a team that said, okay, I can be there. Usually, we try to advocate for the financing part too, because that's a very strong issue, right? Okay, how do you want to create this diversity of people being in those spaces if they don't have the access to funds to go or the visa to go? Or if you put it in places which is very hard to get into, right? So it's like we consider all those things and we ask in our groups, within our networks, it's like, okay, it's going to be this event. It's in this country. Who is closer? Or who can get there, who doesn't have work duties or school duties because some of them are still studying. So it's like, what can we do? Or who can be there present representing us? And then we start like, okay, this happened. It has to have a lot of communication, right? Like, okay, you know what? They said this in the ministerial meeting. What can we do? What is our position? What do we advocate for? Or they shift completely the program. For example, in one of the negotiations now that one is happening, I'm in a youth group that is part of Jungo. So they were saying, okay, the ministerial session change completely from being about advocating for the stakeholders to technical language. What can we do? The statement doesn't work. And they were saying like, no, it works because they are looking away. And that's a message too because they are deciding not to talk about it. So let's remind them why are we here? And it's a hard work and it involves a lot of people, not only me, but tons of people across the globe. And sometimes it also means that you build and you trust people that you don't haven't seen before. But you learn that as we have the same objectives of being present, then we can trust each other to build a better world.
Right. I would also like to speak about your prior points, which is, something that you beautifully mentioned, that our name may not be there, but we are all contributors, right? And you spoke about climate change on one side, disaster risk reduction on another side, and these are not connected, and also regarding short-term thinking and all that. And the rule does not last for, 50 years and all. And I think there are also recent developments such as AI, right? And you spoke right now about the trust that we build within each other. So, given your work on emerging technologies at UNDRR, how do you see the use of these tools of AI and social media empowering youth to take a more active and even leadership role in disaster resilience?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it excites me a lot because this is where it gets interesting. Like, how can you think about that we are the most connected humans in history, but at the same time, we're the most vulnerable? So, if one server shuts down, where does all of that information go? And I see AI as tools. Social media for me is a tool too. So um, it it shifted our way of thinking or how to be. there and how we can participate into how can we lead something and in all these resilience efforts. So AI can help us to analyze risk, to predict impact, to make data more accessible, which is such a problem right now. But at the same time, social media can mobilize these communities and spread the early warning systems and amplify these local voices. So it is a tool, but technology is not automatically inclusive. I mean, there are some risks, digital divides, the misinformation, and the unequal access to tools. We're talking about AI and having internet connection, but in some communities, they don't even have access to electricity. So at the same time, we are fighting like with all those fires at the same time, right? And the real opportunity is not just using technology, but democratizing technology. And I believe that the youth is doing this already. Like they create community, like your initiative that started 10 months ago. It's something that you translate all that information that we have already, digital or in paper, and we organize those responses. And then people can be more connected and can understand what it means to be in the real time. So the question for me is whether the institutions are ready to trust and support this or to look away and say that it's only a youth thing. I was thinking the other day about, for example, the radio. For some people, radio is like, oh, that's so old. But for some people, it's like that is my way of being communicated with someone else because I don't have access to this big satellite or something. And that's very important too. How do we communicate? How we have built all this technology and scientists in the past had built these big, big technologies and how we can keep using them to democratize information because information is power. And how do we shift from make them also you'd realize that it is important to keep everything documented, but you also need to choose your fights and not being like this uh spreading misinformation or spreading this as fear, but transform it into something that is very helpful, and then can people be calm about it? So, yeah.
Right. I think we have, Matthew here who has raised his hand. Matthew, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, hi, Catherine. Can you explain, just clarify the difference between disaster risk reduction and management?
Yeah, of course. So, disaster risk reduction is when you think about the policies once the disaster or the hazard already happened. And you have like a whole structure of what to do in the case of, okay, what to do once the hazard is already with you, right? Okay, if it's an earthquake, what can you do? If it's a tsunami, what can you do? And what governments can do? Okay, now that they hit you, who can you go with? Or how can you ask for help? All that is disaster risk reduction. But disaster risk management is thinking before the disaster happens. So, how can you plan a city to prevent if you know that you have floods every year, of that you have hurricanes every year, and those are going to happen because it's the natural earth cycle. Those are happening. What cannot happen over and over again every year is the disaster that leaves when they hit. What can you do to prevent those? And that is management. So you think ahead. Okay, I know that it will rain in August, for example, in the Caribbean. The hurricane season in the Caribbean is from August to November. What can we do? If we know that this is going to happen no matter what, okay, then we start protecting our cities, or we start to creating policies, or we start to giving away kits for people to be prepared. We start to accompany them, and then you start to create a resilient community because they have this basis where they can rely on, right? And reduction of risk is like, okay, I think about this, and we're talking about something that I have the tools to build back better, right? But how can I prevent even that? So basically, that's the difference.
I got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sarupya, you were also raising hand. Would you like to ask something?
Yeah, hi, Catherine. So my question is that since you have worked with in the United Nations, you have been there, and there are so many political leaders who are actually at the top of the hierarchy level of various countries. So I would just want to ask a different question. I would like to know, like, your perspective on how do these leaders or these politicians view us, like view the youth? Do they take us seriously, or do they just like see us something that doesn't require needed to be taken serious? So I just wanted to know your perspective on that part.
Okay, thank you, Sarupia. Well, I believe it depends on the leader and on how they envision their proper youth participation into the picture, right? There are some leaders that they are actually looking for youth people, like they want to interact with them. There are some leaders that, I'm going to be completely honest, they're just get in the room and get out of the room once they finish their statements or whatever. So I really believe it depends on their personal point of view. But so far, within the UN, it has been very wonderful because they understand why they are here. They are also advocating for us being there too. And once member states decide, like, okay, we're going to let them participate in this way, then the UN starts like spreading the word. Hey, we need you to come, or we need you to, or these are our possibilities to help you to get there. So they are really advocating for youth inclusion into the conversations. And at the same time, they are also advocating for youth meaningful participation. So I have seen the United Nations itself shift their perspective into how can we make this fair for all of them. If it's an internship, do we have the possibility to be paid internships? Or if we have this contribution, can we see the possibility of having them like in the whole process, not only when the final moment came, right? So as an institution, they have worked a lot, and they keep advocating because they know it's not enough. Currently, due to the demographic statistics, we are the group of population that it's bigger, the bigger group of population, youth. And it's like, how can we actually tell them that we need them, that we want them, without having this adult perspective of I know more than you? And they are shifting this way of thinking, like, okay, you already studied. And we even hold the master degrees. And back in those days, holding a master degree was like, why? Right? You only needed your bachelor degree and you were just fine. But currently we need more and we need to prove ourselves more. So even if it's like they graduate 2, 3 years ago, so they have the information all fresh and they live in the reality. So let's include them. So as an institution, they have being advocated for it. Member states, it actually depends on how they envision youth. For example, in Mexico, um, 3 years ago, they started to be like very vocal about youth and to include them even nationally to go to the General Assembly, for example, as part of the Mexican delegation. So I can speak for other countries, but I can speak for my country. And what I have seen from the government is like they try to include youth, but even those spaces are very like there are a few. Or for example, for this position of the being in the General Assembly, they only have 3 spots for all the country. So it is something that even if you are doing something, we know it needs to have more, or we need to do more. So I believe that gives you perspective, but that also gives you the opportunity to believe that change is happening. And the more vocal you are as youth about the changes that we need to make, then something is happening too.
Thank you so much. Your answer was really informative, and at the same time, it was full of insights of the real practical work.
You're welcome.
So locally, I just want to point out in India also, when we started this project 10 months ago, so it was quite like we were not taken seriously when we approached schools, when we approached these colleges. But we did 2 months of 3 months of consistent work, and then we had a meeting with India's National Disaster Management Authority, and they were really impressed. They were very happy that youth is getting involved. They signed an MOM with us and provided us with all the resources. And once there was their backing, then we were taken more seriously. So earlier, I would say, and they are now promoting more clubs in our colleges and schools. So earlier, the perspective in India also was like, yeah, youth, how will youth who are not experts in this get involved in disaster risk reduction? But slowly it is changing, and yeah, we are observing the change here also. So
Yeah, I'm sorry.
no, no, Catherine, you can please speak. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I do believe that realizing that um your population needs something from you and that you can have an answer for that, it should be rewarding, right? So I'm very happy to hear stories about that too.
So, from your perspective, what would a global policy that could be inclusive for youth look like? What are the some points that should be considered in such policies?
Okay, well, I have 2 points for here. Number one is that we need to look for children inclusion specifically. I do believe that, of course, we are all affected, but how children live, see, and understand risk, it's very different. For some of them, it's just like, I don't understand what is happening, but my mom told me that I have to go. I don't know what's happening, but my dad raised me from the ground and we live now in the um in the top of our house. So first of all, if I could rewrite this global policy, is to look at the youngest youth, to look at children and say, are you okay? What are you feeling? How can we help you? Because information for them, it needs to be digested differently. And they feel a lot because they are learning about their emotions. So, first of all, children. Like they live this, and when you see it, it's very complicated for them to I had an experience as a teacher a few months ago. I was given a course and it was rainy season in Mexico. And one of my students said, I had to move from my house and I haven't slept well. And I know I didn't give my 100% into this test, but I do feel bad. And he was crying. And he was a 12-year-old. And it's like, okay, you know what? Let me speak to your parents that they can come and pick you up if they can, or if someone can, that you can go and rest home. And he said, I don't have a home because it is flooded. The river that it's behind my house increased their water capacity. So my house is now full of water. My room is full of water. I don't have a home. I am staying with my grandparents. And that really hit me hard because we live in the same city and that was something that it was not happening to me. So children need to be at the center of this. And I will also move in terms of the grown-ups. I will also move into from youth inclusion into youth accountability. So how we can make these youth representation decision-making bodies, how we can dedicate funding to these initiatives that you have, to how we can have measurable indicators to track this engagement. Not just mention it, not just say like, oh, we are going to include youth. No, how, when, why, in what capacity? Are you needing them as advisors? Are you needing them as commenters of your document? Are you getting involved in them? So we are recognized, but structurally, we are not embedded into those policies. And I will change that. And this needs to change, of course, institutional inertia because we are, I believe, in an institutional inertia. We need to shift the power of dynamics, but we also need to see youth as this strategic actors instead of being seen as just symbolic actors that are there and they represent something. And until that shifts, then the progress will remain slower than it needs to be. But if we shift that, then I believe that we can see a more impactful way of seeing and acting.
Right, Catherine. I think speaking about inclusion and also you speaking about inclusion of children, we recently had a conversation with Patricia. She's the founder of National Pediatric Disaster Coalition. And we spoke more about, how many systems are built for adults. And we often overlook that children respond to these situations differently. That was one thing. And we got to learn a lot from her. And we've also taken resources from our partner COPE, which also helps in educating kids. So we've used their jingles and coloring books, and that also has helped these kids whom we support. They are from the place called Mohanji Angan, and there are about 55 kids for whom we did recently. We are planning to do many more, and this has helped us a lot. Also, the video resources of NDMA, which we have received, it's like the cartoon resources. So that helps kids a lot. This is what we have understood, and we have also realized they tend to memorize it well when we, use these resources. So yeah, that's really a nice, initiative that we need to include more, children. And regarding, policy again, if you could rewrite one global policy on disaster risk reduction specifically to center youth voices, what would it say?
Um, well, it will say that we need to involve youth from the start, not as the final checkbox, as all the stakeholders are treated currently in most of the spaces, like, oh, I already have this. I need you to review it. And I need you to tell me that it's okay. And if it's not okay, then tell me your comments, and then I will get back to you in a moment and tell you if I made those changes or not. So I do believe that we need to be involved from the start. And we also need to have funding for local leadership, not just for global representation, because those spaces last only one day or two. But if we invest in local leadership, that they actually get back to their communities and interact with people, that also means that recognizing youth not only as a group but um, as a diverse group of people that can shift policies and the reflections into that type of criteria, right? So yeah.
Right. These were really great insights, Catherine. I think I'm sure that our audience enjoyed this as well, and you've really inspired us a lot. And I
Thank
think,
you, Anusha. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but there is a question in the chat that I
all
Yes,
would
right,
like
yes.
to
yeah,
assess. It says that, well, Hetal, I really hope that I pronounced that right, said, are we more vulnerable today for disasters than before with all the developments happening around? That's a tricky question. Because yes and no. I mean, if we start relying everything on technology, then the answer is yes. Because one power shift, one lighting, one everything can shut us down as a whole city, country, community. Like we have no power, then we are incommunicated, right? But I will say no because we have more um, tools, we have more information to be prepared, and even if we don't have access to internet, for example, maybe we read something on some time when I was navigating through my feed and said, okay, I've just remembered this information that can help me. So it's not like, I mean, you know what I mean? It's a tricky question, but at the same time, it makes you realize how the old and the new ways of doing things both are very important, and that we need um, to be like this. So, yeah. Thank you so much for your question.
I
There's
think
one
there's a
more question. Yeah.
Okay.
There's one more
Thank
question, Catherine, from Monica. She first thanks you for being here with us. And then she asks,
Mhm.
I have a question that might not be specifically connected to disaster risk reduction, but more related to you as someone who works in the UN. I have many friends who tried to apply to work for the UN, but it was very difficult for them to get accepted. Does someone who works for the UN need to have special character traits with more of a leader role?
Thank you, Monica. This is from a personal perspective that I have applied myself to many things. And once I get into my regional office and how I have contributed with them, sometimes it's as a consultant, sometimes it's as just an observer, sometimes so it's very hard. The UN system itself, if you want to hold a specific position, then it has a lot of requirements. It has experience, or for some of them ask you for a master's degree or 7+ years of experience. But I have friends who are currently working in the UN. One is in New York and one is in Panama. And those amazing girls, what they did first was advocate a lot. They got involved into situations where they were not paid at the beginning, but they wanted to be there and they fight. Like they they try to go for more. Like, okay, I want to be visible. I'm going to attend to this virtual meeting, even if it's 3 in the morning for me. I want to start being present for the system so people can recognize that I'm one, even if they don't know me physically, they know that I'm there. So when the UN starts inviting stakeholders into these virtual conversations, I will say, go. Please go, please attend, please interact. And and once they did that, then they started like applying, okay, I have this experience, I have been advocating in this. They do a lot of community work. So that is a way of getting into the system at the beginning without being in the system. And then they started to approach people according to their needs. And for example, one is in the youth office, and she's wonderful. And she has been advocating from climate change since she's 14 or something. Currently, she's 30. So it was, and she didn't get the UN job until 1 year ago. So it is a long process. And I guess what I'm trying to say is just, of course, we wanted our opportunities to be faster and ready. And we live in a world that we believe that it has to happen all at once. And for some situations, I do agree, and some of them need time. So it's just like if you're getting into this world, then keep, if that is really your goal, we need to keep working on our roles. For example, this is I mean, it's not my only job. I have a job in Mexico, and I was a teacher, like I said a few moments ago. I used to be a teacher, an English teacher for Mexican youth. That is not related to the things that I was advocating at first, but I understand that I needed to eat, right? So it's something like, okay, at the same time, you need to realize in what system you're in, and don't lose hope on your goal. If that is your goal, work for it, but work really hard for it, and don't lose perspective. Even if you have to do some other things, don't lose perspective into your goal, and you will get there, even if it's in 10 years from now. But you will realize that it happens when it has to happen. So yeah.
Thank you, Monica, for that question. And thank you, Catherine, for this answer, because I feel it truly shows that, there's a lot of hard work, there's a lot of planning, and the confidence, of course, that you carry. And as you've mentioned earlier, I still do remember this, that our name may not be known initially, but we are all contributors, right? And you represent that voice. Right now, you've been, because of all the work that you've done, which has shown, and it has paid off in this role. And also do the work without any expectations. That's what something that, we learn as, Mohanji Youth Club volunteers to do this. So yeah, I think this has been a really amazing and inspiring session, Catherine. Thank you so much. And is there anybody else who would like to ask any question? And Mohanish, would you like to add something?
I would just like to thank Catherine for joining us and taking out her time for us. And it was really inspiring to hear about her role and yeah, and the work she's doing. So she is all. If I get it correctly, right, Catherine, you are still in some other jobs also, but you are also handling these roles. That's really amazing. That's really amazing. So, I should tell you that we are also. I'm actually, my background is also a different one from disaster preparedness. So I'm also in a different job. Anusha is also in a different job, and this is all also we are also all volunteer led. So yeah, as you pointed out, of course, we need
Mhm.
food on our plates. So yeah, and that's
Yeah.
your journey really inspires us because yeah, you have made an impact in the world, and that is really inspiring. And we also try to achieve something that has actual value for the youth and their communities. So thank you so much for joining us.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Mohanish. I will close to say that even if you are not impacting the ton, if you are impacting the people who is next to you, that is change. So remember, in every room you are, just remember that your voice is the voice of many, and that if you in any way change the perspective or empower someone or inspire someone to change something from themselves or to shift the way of thinking about climate change or something, then you do your work. And that's what we need, the collectiveness of changing the way of thinking. So thank you so much for inviting me. It was very wonderful to be with you today.
Thank you once again, Catherine. And we wish you all the very best from the entire team of MYC. And to everyone who is listening here, thank you for joining today. And until next time, take care, stay alert, aware, and active. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Catherine.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Catherine. Thank you so much.